Integration of child parts after shamanic soul retrieval can be tricky terrain because they come with different requirements than with adult parts or with past life parts. My name is Tania Aurora Whitecrow, and I work as a shamanka, which is a Northern European term for a shamanic medicine woman. I've already shared another video about shamanic soul retrieval. There can be some misunderstanding around what that is. And so in brief, shamanic soul retrieval is about retrieving parts of our energy that we have left in past events, either through trauma or sometimes through happy events. But for whatever reason, we've not processed that fully, and we've left a part of ourselves there, and we've just continued on with life. Okay. And those parts can come back in many different ways, but I'm here talking specifically about the methodology of shamanic soul retrieval. I will link the previous video and some of my blog posts that explain more about that. So retrieving child soul parts. There are really three areas. There are the pre-verbal child parts, the teenage parts, and the ones in between. Okay. And they all have slightly different requirements, okay, or challenges of integrating them. Now, when I have retrieved a soul part for somebody or soul parts for somebody, I will suggest that they work with that part for a month. Sometimes the integration can happen quicker, but a month is a really good time to spend with that part, especially when it's a child part. Within shamanism, the healing story is really what's important. So when we retrieve a part of ourselves, we are also having to persuade them to come back, to let them know that things are very different in our life now, and that we are able to look after them and meet their needs in a way, if these are parts from our current lifetime, in a way that we weren't able to when we were younger. And as well as that, we also need to let them know that we need them. So it's this kind of mutual exchange. It's like, look, this is what my life is like now. And also, you know, the qualities that that part brings you that you will value. Now, there can be many areas in the actual retrieval where this may be a little bit trickier than others, but essentially this video is about what happens after that part is retrieved and come back, and how you integrate that and spend that month working with that part. Okay, so we'll start with the ages pre-adolescent, from the time of becoming, when they're verbal. So say about the ages of 4 to 12, shall we say. So parts of about that age, they have the language, they have that kind of verbal understanding. And because of that, it can be easier to communicate with them. So it can be straightforward in the way of, you know the gifts that they are bringing you, and you know where your life is now, and so therefore the gifts that you are bringing them, and how you have this mutual exchange of benefits. So it is about having fun with that child part, because you're in effect reparenting them. You're showing them that you're not their mother or father, but you are still reparenting them. So it is around about having some fun, you know, meet them at their age. And this is the important thing, you know, around these childhood traumas. And I don't want to dismiss some of the really serious and devastating ones, whether they're through accidents or through what other people have done. But often trauma from a child's perspective can be very different from how we see it as an adult perspective. So we really need to learn to see through their eyes and understand their perspective of what happened. Okay. And then show them what the world is like now, depending on your age. For me, most of my child parts never knew things like a mobile phone, for example, and the different music that's around and how people are different. Those generational differences, they can be a lot of fun to explore. Okay. So really spending that time learning to see through their eyes, because that can bring back that innocence and that fun and that joy back into your life as well, whatever qualities they are bringing back for you. So once they've returned, that can be quite a fun, we talk about inner child work, that can be a fun way of working with them and playing with them, whether we just randomly skip down the street or just do silly things just for the sake of it and really learn to connect. Okay. With pre-verbal parts, the difficulty there is that there isn't language in the same way. And so therefore there's not thinking in the same way. And also one of the gifts there is they're not as separate from the other realms that they've incarnated from. They can still have some of that multidimensionality inherent there as well. So it really is about learning to communicate through your intuition, through your body language, like with the baby who's crying, why are they crying? So with those emotions, Thich Nhat Hanh in his work often talks about, when we have feelings come up, treat them like a baby. We don't know what's wrong, but we have to work it out. Is it because they're hungry? Are they thirsty? Have they got a wet nappy? So what is going on? And really learning to bring that back. Again, as I said, with pre-verbal parts, it's about seeing it from the baby's perspective, the baby or toddler perspective. So there can be a lot of things that can happen that happen throughout whole generations, okay? Things like not feeding on demand. So their needs weren't being met, which can bring up a whole generation of people who have that insecurity if their parents followed that, because that's what they thought was the right thing to do. Learn how to control your baby. But what that does, it brings up a whole lot of trauma because their needs aren't being met. They need to survive. The people who are their caretakers aren't meeting those needs. For a baby to be put in that situation, on one hand, they may have this multi-dimensional connection and this kind of understanding that there's something much bigger, but at the other hand, they're in this physical form, this really vulnerable physical form, and there's nobody there to meet them. Okay. So from an adult perspective, that might seem to be something that's simple. So, these events might not be what we expect them to be. Okay. They still produce trauma. Okay. So again, it is really learning to connect in with that way. Sometimes, when people are really deeply in that part of integration, when that part is coming up to be seen and witnessed and integrated, they might find that their communication shuts down. They can't think clearly, and that can be one of these young parts coming to the fore, to be recognized and to be witnessed. Okay. Teenage parts. Teenage parts can be stroppy. They can be difficult. They want to rebel. They're like, fuck you. Who do you think you are? And in my experience, very often, and I mentioned this earlier, they're treating you like a parent. And it's to remind them, no, I'm not your parent. I'm the future version of you. And I know with one of my parts that I was integrating, I was able to show them because of where I was during the integration of like, look at all these things. You dreamt of this. Look, I am doing this now, you know? And that was a really beautiful thing. And that part then started to come around and was like, oh yeah, and stopped treating me like a mother and started treating me as the future version of herself. So that's the kind of energy that you need to meet the teenager with, is to remind them of that. And to work through. And again, it's things like music and mobile phones and computers and the things that weren't around when they were in their teens. And that can be a really great way of having these conversations with those parts of yourselves and building those bridges so that they're really happy to be part of your life in the now, and not stay where they are in the past because they think that's familiar, that's where they're going to stay. Okay, so it is as simple as that, but it can take a lot of work. And, this idea of, in effect, having conversations with ourselves is really important. So there's different ways we can do that. We might actually want to act that out in different ways, like the Gestalt method of the two chairs, and have the place for the part that you're integrating and a place for yourself, and have that conversation like that. Or, kind of that role play, have a couple of toys or something that you can have in front of you and imagine that conversation between those two things. So there's different ways of doing that, if that makes it easier for you than trying to have that as an internal dialogue. It just depends on what works for you. You can journal, you can write, but do have those conversations. This idea of like talking to ourselves, right, might feel a little bit like unsettling when we're actually given permission to talk to ourselves so that we can bring ourselves back into that wholeness. So I'm wishing you much joy and magic in integrating those parts of yourself as they return. Sending you much love from my heart to yours.